You missed some important news from the LGBTQ plus community this week. To ensure you are current, we are recapping that important news. Here's what you may have missed.
Remember March 15th? America's shutdown over COVID-19 changed us all. 3 years ago, our world was changed by a pandemic. Queer News Tonight first started reporting on COVID-19 at the end of January, and by February, we were reporting nightly on the spreading disease. Fittingly, it was from our set that was at the time housed at the World AIDS Museum. On March 15, 2020, the United States started the process of shutting down in an attempt to curb the spread of COVID-19. Science was still scrambling to understand the virus, and there was confusion in much of the media coverage over what the best safety practices were. On March 18th, the Happening Out television network was hit directly by the virus. As unknown to us, its Happening Out political commentator, Ron Brenesky, had contracted the virus prior to his March 18th appearance on our weekly talk show. 2 days later, he was hospitalized and by the weekend had been placed in a medically induced coma from which he would never wake before passing. Through a community partner, the network was able to get some of the new tests administered the cast and crew of the shows, and host Chef Josie also tested positive. She would continue to test positive for a full month. The struggles of the network were just a small sample of the ways that LGBTQ plus community was hit in general by the pandemic. With many members of our community working in the service industry, the stop to travel and the closing of bars and restaurants meant no income to many LGBTQ plus individuals. For those who weren't in contact with family due to their gender or sexual identity, the lockdowns and quarantines meant an increase in mental health issues such as depression, as well as an increase in substance abuse issues. Challenges that disproportionately affect the transgender members of our community and the BIPOC community were compounded as a lack of healthcare and stable housing led to a higher risk of those individuals contracting the virus. 3 years later, our community is still recovering from the pandemic and lockdowns. Social events are only now starting to become popular again, and vacations like cruises are still considered risky by many. March 15, 2020, we remember. This is an interesting story because my sister, who is 8 years younger than me, so turning 25 in a few weeks, was the first person I knew that had COVID. And she was an EMT at the time, ended up in the hospital and with pneumonia. And it was very shocking because it was supposed to be that this is not a young person's thing. 3 years ago, it's not a young person's thing. And just all of the confusion around it. I remember my anxiety that was like, I'm not leaving the house. We're all wiping our groceries down. Like
our shoes.
Right. The run on Costco to get toilet paper and all of that, like the lack of clarity, but also just as we discussed, not having a government that is putting systems in place to protect its people and allowing people to die.
Well, it's really incredible how this story impacted the network. I mean, I remember hearing about this when I first started coming here, and it's just amazing. But on the other hand, it's really not that surprising that our community was certainly familiar with a government, certainly under Republican rule, that was willing to overlook segments of the population that they deemed unworthy.
Right.
Well, I think we also learned a lot of lessons, not only for our community specifically around the HIV/AIDS epidemic, but also COVID-19 that we were able to apply to monkeypox to really get that under control before that became a much larger issue.
True. I mean, I think we're still seeing the financial impact of the COVID pandemic. I mean, the things that are happening and the changes that have happened to the economy, both from the severe decline in the stock market to now, inflation coming out of the shortage of items that couldn't be produced. These impacts are going to be felt for a long period of time. The housing crisis is a really good example because, again, just housing was underdeveloped and then really took, you take a pause in building housing or expanding housing or people not starting their families or starting their lives, moving out of their parents' homes who graduated from college, staying at home for 2 more years. And then all of a sudden it was like, everyone can resume, go back to normal. Yeah. It is causing ripple effects that we still don't fully understand. So, and also, the supply chain and seeing how vulnerable the country was, whether it was from medication to chips for our cell phones, that we were vulnerable to not having our own supply of things.
Right.
It's interesting as people watch this report, tomorrow being March 15th, and you think about what happened 3 years ago, tomorrow, March 15th. I'm not sure it has digested over us of the impact of what we went through. I think in many instances we're still in various ways going through the trauma of the event without being able to really process it. The condo that I was living in was right off of Commercial. I will never forget walking out onto Commercial Boulevard, 3-lane major road in Fort Lauderdale, 3 lanes in each direction, and there were no cars. I was in San Antonio for a Christmas holiday event, and there was no one in downtown, where it could have been an episode of The Walking Dead. Ron Brenesky, I'm really glad we didn't show the video of for the Wednesday night show of just days before the closure event. We were at World AIDS Museum, and I was sitting 2 people beside him, away from him at It's Happening Out. We were doing the show live, and the reason Ron was so valuable to us is he was a Republican. And he was a key voice in Miami-Dade County's politics for the Republican Party in Miami-Dade County. And we loved him at It's Happening Out because, like tonight, our voice is our voice. There's nuances of our voice, but there's a lot of similarity in our voice. And then Ron would go, not so fast. And it was a wonderful experience to have that kind of voice before they went off the deep end. And we haven't been able to find anybody LGBT to represent that. We went after that show to a party in a club, and I won't say which club we went to, and just had no idea that what we were doing was getting ready to explode on us. The next day, the notice of him feeling ill, the next day, on Friday, into the hospital. And it was the next day after that that he went into a medically-induced coma of ICU, which he never came out of. For me, I just tell the story of what a moment. I will never forget it for my entire life. My last day, I will think about that day, because it was like, wait, we were all with him. And this is like March 17th. Wait, what's going to happen? And only because of connection, of our media connection, there was a company here that was getting ready to do COVID testing, but it had not been generally released. And all of us were in place, all production, all of the anchors, everyone connected with the show are at home in place. And a nurse came in complete surgical, complete mask, like you're going to go into space, to administer the pass-through of the test, take the test of the swab back to them, and we are to find out the next day. We don't find out the next day. It's 2 days, and only Josie was positive. But for us to be able to get a COVID test, that and that stage of the pandemic was just amazing. And of course, we did not know that Ron was going to pass, but we knew how serious this was. March 15th is very important to all of us, and I don't think we realize how important March 15th is. I think in coming years we will.
And I think even on the flip side of everything we lost is also in those moments where everything had to stop, what we saw from our environment, like the planet healing itself.
When animals reappearing.
Like dolphins and previously dirty water.
Like around the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
Whoa, that's pretty.
Exactly. Wow. I'm just like, to see all of that, everything stood still for those moments where the earth was given time to just, kind of heal from the deep wounds that we've caused as humans. And then to just go back to, like you said, things as if they're regular.
March 5th. Keep watching the only television news in the world from our LGBTQ plus community, and stay informed on everything that is important for and about our diverse LGBTQ plus community.